The kingdom of Solaria basked in eternal daylight, a land where shadows dared not stretch far and the sky always wore golden hues. Prince Kael stood at the edge of the sunstone balcony, the wind warm against his face, as if the air itself carried the breath of fire. His hair, copper and gold, moved like flame, and the robes on his broad shoulders shimmered with woven light. Yet, beneath all that brilliance, a weight rested behind his molten gold eyes, a longing for something he couldn't name, something hidden in the places sunlight never touched. That he had grown up in palaces of heat and echoing halls of marble, trained in swordplay and diplomacy, expected to be fire incarnate, just like his ancestors. But Kael had always been different. He found comfort in the quiet, fascination in the stars, and beauty in the icy silence of old stories, especially those whispered tales of Navarra, the neighboring kingdom of twilight and snow. In Navarra, the sun never rose. The world there existed in a constant hush of silver twilight. Princess Alira, heir to the Frost Throne, was born during the quietest snowfall of the century. Her skin gleamed like moon-kissed snow, and her eyes were the color of winter storms, blue and endless. She walked barefoot on ice, spoke in lullabies, and carried the weight of ancient magic in her veins. Her palace was carved into the cliffs of frost, her companions wolves and whispers, her words as precise and sharp as icicles. Alira had never seen true sunlight, never felt warmth that wasn't conjured. And she didn't care, until she found a secret chamber in the palace's lowest library. A room forgotten by time, filled with forbidden scrolls and one delicate, forbidden story, the tale of Solaria. She read every word like a child discovering a lost melody. Her heart quickened at the description of fire, of heat, of colors like crimson and gold. And she read about the prince born under firelight, the one who stood alone atop a glowing throne, never smiling. And somewhere, across the mountain range, Kael discovered a similar legend, one of a moonlit girl whose voice could calm storms, who had never known sunlight, yet shone brighter than any flame. They were myths to each other. Until the Isle of Equinox called. Every century, when the eclipse passed directly over the isle, the two kingdoms were allowed 1 hour of truce. During that hour, leaders met, not as enemies, but as equals. It was ceremony. Nothing more. But for Kael and Alira, it was fate. Kael stepped off the burning ship that carried Solaria's delegation and felt, for the first time in his life, a breeze that wasn't hot. The island felt balanced, suspended between light and dark. Above them, the eclipse had begun. The sun and moon kissed in the sky, casting silver-gold shadows across marble floors and mirrored pools. Alira entered in silence, her steps soundless against the cold stone. Her silver gown floated like mist, and her hair was woven with white roses. When Kael turned and saw her, the air caught in his lungs. The warmth inside him surged, but not in a way he was used to. This was something quieter. Deeper. She saw him too, the golden figure wrapped in sunlight, standing like a myth. They stared. No words passed. Not yet. But something ancient stirred. During the feast, he watched her from across the mirror table, reflections dancing between them. She never looked away. And when the musicians began to play, Alira did something no princess of Navarra had done in centuries. She crossed the floor and offered her hand to a prince of fire. Their fingers touched, and the world tilted. The moment didn't last long. The eclipse faded. The hour ended. The delegation was called. But Alira and Kael each returned to their kingdoms with hearts no longer whole. The days after the eclipse were harder than any war. Kael walked the burning gardens alone, replaying the moment her hand touched his. Alira, hidden beneath snow-laced canopies, held a single candle every night, waiting for a sign he might be thinking of her too. And then it came. A sunflower, fresh and golden, blooming in the dead of Nivern winter. Wrapped in its stem was a letter, burned into fine golden script, asterisk, did the stars always feel this close, or did you bring them with you? Asterisk, Alira, who hadn't smiled in years, laughed. Her reply came in the form of a snowflake, perfectly preserved, delivered to Kael's window on a breeze no one could explain. Inside was a single word, asterisk, both. Asterisk. Their letters continued. Each one a secret rebellion, each message a stitch weaving them closer together. Seasons passed. At night, Kael would lie beneath artificial stars conjured in the ceiling of his chamber, reading Elira's whispered words aloud. In Navarra, Elira melted bits of frost just to feel warmth when she read his poems. Their hearts had never known such yearning, such impossibility, such clarity, until the next eclipse. It had been 1 year. This time, Cale didn't just send a letter, he came with a gift, a flame lily that glowed with inner light, unburning and eternal. Elira met him beneath the eclipse tree. She touched the flower and it bloomed even brighter. They danced in front of everyone. Fire and frost. Sun and snow. When her fingers touched his cheek, Cale whispered, I would burn the sky to see you again. But their kingdoms watched with horror. That dance shattered a prophecy carved into mountain stone, if sun and moon touch, the world shall break. The kings called war councils. The queens demanded blood. But Cale and Elira had tasted something more dangerous than magic, hope. Cale stood before his father and said, I will not marry a stranger. I will not wear a crown that weighs more than her absence. Elira shattered the frost orb that symbolized her right to the throne and said, I would rather feel warmth once and lose everything than freeze my heart forever. They fled, together, riding a phoenix born of fire, and the valley they discovered was untouched by time. Neither Solarian nor Niveran maps marked it. //www.text-to-speech.online/#NAV_text soil pulsed with old magic, and the sky bore both sun and moon, never clashing, always dancing. In this hidden realm, Cale and Elira built their kingdom with their own hands, stone by stone, blossom by blossom. They named it Velethar, which meant, between the light. Years passed. Trees grew taller. The phoenix, their eternal companion, nested above their chamber window, its feathers shedding light and frost. Their people came, outcasts, dreamers, those who had tired of kingdoms made of fire and fear or silence and shadow. Together, they created a place where warmth and cold weren't enemies, just different ways of feeling alive. And then, one night, the wind changed. Elira awoke to the sound of cracking ice, not from outside, but inside her chest. Cale held her hand, and as her breath came in short whispers, she gripped his fingers and said, something is coming. He had dreamed it too, a vision of flames turning blue, of a crown of thorns made from frost, and a voice neither of them recognized that echoed through the valley, what you stole was never yours to keep. The prophecy they had broken had left a scar in the world, and that scar had begun to bleed. The kingdoms of Solaria and Navarra, long at odds, had found common purpose in their hatred. A child born of both flame and frost. Unnatural. Unholy. Dangerous, because what Cale and Elira had not shared with the world was this: their daughter, Serral, born beneath a full eclipse. Serral had hair as white as the sun's edge and eyes like stormfire. Her skin held the warmth of summer and the chill of new snow. When she laughed, flowers bloomed and wilted in the same breath. When she cried, the clouds wept fire. She was not just their daughter. She was the living thread that stitched two realms together, and the prophecy's worst fear. Word of Serral spread, whispers turned to panic. In Solaria, the flame order gathered, breathing war through their temples. In Navarra, the frostbound seers awoke after centuries of slumber, warning that the child would melt the moon and drown the stars, and so, they came, not armies. Worse, they sent a being forged from prophecy itself, a creature born in the void between the sun and moon. Its name was Tyrex, the eclipse warden. Neither alive nor dead, Tyrex carried a crown made of broken oaths and armor etched with forgotten runes. It did not speak. It simply moved toward Velethar, with one goal: erase the girl. Cale was the first to see it, a shadow that did not follow light, walking toward their valley without ever touching the ground. Elira felt it in the bones of the earth, the way the air refused to sing that morning. Serral, now 6 years old, looked up from her drawing of a firebird and said, "Mama, something bad is coming." Cale stood at the gate, sword in hand, flame curling around his arm. Elira rose beside him, frost climbing her shoulders like armor. Together, they faced the prophecy's wrath, not as king and queen, but as parents. Tyrex struck without sound. Cale's fire turned blue against its blade. Elira's frost shattered before its shadow. Every spell, every enchantment, every charm they had built failed one by one. And when the warden stepped into their home, its eyes locked not on them, but on Cyril. She did not run. The little girl stood in the middle of the stone floor, her eyes wide but steady, her hands curled into fists. When T-Rex raised its blade, Cyril did something no one expected. She smiled. A ring of light burst from her chest, half gold, half silver. Fire did not burn, frost did not freeze. Instead, everything paused. Time trembled. The prophecy hesitated, and in that moment, Cyril walked forward and touched the creature's chest. "You're not real," she whispered. "You're afraid. That's why you scream silence." The warden, born from fear of unity, cracked. Its armor split down the center, and out of it came no monster. The winds in Velithar changed again, this time, not with the scent of war or the weight of prophecy, but something quieter, and older. A stillness in the air, as if the very world was holding its breath. Cyril was now 14. She had grown into a quiet storm, graceful but powerful, with a presence that silenced rooms. Her white gold hair spilled like liquid moonlight down her back, and her eyes shimmered like heated ice. Kale watched her spar with frostfire blades in the courtyard, and Elira often stood behind him, their fingers entwined, proud but wary. Cyril had dreams, strange ones. Dreams of a forest with silver leaves and no sound. A place where time forgot its name. And always, in the center, a mirror that showed her not herself, but versions of herself, older, younger, angry, broken, even monstrous. One morning, she woke and said only 4 words, "I have to go." Kale and Elira didn't try to stop her. They had once defied the world for love. Now, they had to trust that love again, this time for their daughter. Cyril left Velithar at sunrise, walking into the forest with no map, no companions, only a whisper of magic trailing behind her. The phoenix flew overhead, a distant shadow of protection. Days passed, then weeks, and in her absence, the silence began that it started in Navarra. People stopped dreaming. Then Solaria, flames that once danced became still, frozen in mid-flicker. And in Velithar, frost would form in the air, unmelted by the sun. The balance had begun to fade. Kale looked into the fire that no longer moved, Elira stared into the frost that no longer grew, and they knew, the world was unraveling again. Cyril had crossed into the Null Wood, the forest of forgotten time. It was not marked on any map, and for good reason. The trees were tall and silver, with no sound between them. Not a bird, not a breeze, not even breath. Magic did not live here, it watched. She followed her dreams to the center of the forest, where she found the mirror. It was taller than the trees and buried in roots. Its surface was black and still, but her reflection was not her own. It was a girl made of cracked light, her eyes hollow, her smile sharp. The reflection stepped out. It wasn't just a shadow, it was what Cyril could become. A version of herself who embraced control, power, domination. The version the prophecy had feared. The child not of balance, but of domination. Not fire and frost in harmony, but war, and the shadow. Cyril spoke, voice smooth and dark. They named you legacy. I am what the world truly needs. You are love. I am survival. The mirror cracked, and the real Cyril fell. Back in Velithar, Kale collapsed to his knees, a scream breaking from his chest. Elira's breath left her body like wind chased from the hills. They could no longer feel her, but Cyril wasn't dead. She had fallen into the veil, the space between realities, where magic waits and stories end. And in the veil, time spoke. She was met by 3 figures, the first flame, the last ice, and the forgotten eclipse. Each asked her a question. Will you burn away fear? Asked flame. Will you freeze doubt? Asked ice. Will you choose love when hate offers power? Asked eclipse. Cyril didn't answer in words. She reached out, touched each of them, and whispered her parents' names. The veil trembled, and she rose. She returned to the Null Wood, her body now glowing with threads of silver and gold, her eyes deeper than galaxies. The shadow Cyril attacked. Their battle wasn't one of blade or spell, but of truth. The shadow threw every dark version of her future at her. Kings kneeling. Worlds burning. Power limitless. Love absent, but Cyril stood her ground. She whispered, I was never meant to rule the world. I was born to remind it to feel. Asterisk and she walked through her shadow self, light exploded, and from it, a second phoenix was born. Back in Velithar, the sun stirred again, flames danced, frost melted, dreams returned. Kale looked to the sky and saw a streak of light curve like a comet. Alira whispered, Asterisk, she's coming home. Asterisk Cyril returned to Velithar with a new scar down her arm, a reminder. But her smile was soft. Not just powerful. Whole, the kingdoms that once feared her now sent envoys not with threats, but with wonder. Children were named after her. Songs were written. And balance, finally, became more than survival. It became culture. Kale and Alira lived to see the world they once dreamed of, one where fire did not consume and frost did not silence. Where love no longer had to fight fate. Cyril would one day lead not as a queen of fire or ice, but as the keeper of stories. The guardian of balance. And the girl who once faced herself, and chose peace, and each century, when the eclipse passed over the isle once more, people would gather and look to the sky. 2 phoenixes would circle above, and the world would remember the prince and the princess who defied destiny, and the daughter who taught destiny to listen.